Hello everyone, Frank here. Today I'm going to do a very quick video based upon a special request that I had from one of my viewers. We're going to install Ubuntu onto VMware, creating an Ubuntu virtual machine. Let's go have a look at how to do that. Let's install a virtual machine and let's install an Ubuntu Linux machine so that we can practice learning about Linux and all the wonderful things it can do. There are many different versions or distributions of Linux. I guess there's only really one version of Linux, but there's many distributions that put packages and such together. A really popular one for folks just starting out would be Ubuntu. So if I go to ubuntu.com to download, you'll notice that I can download a desktop or a server. In my case, I want the desktop. We're going to download Ubuntu Desktop. And I want to install one here. Let's go here. You can see I've got the LTS one, and that's really the stable version of Ubuntu. We'll take that one as opposed to an experimental one. Right now, that happens to be version 22.04.02, so I can click here to download it, and we'll begin the process of downloading it into my downloads folder. Depending on your internet speed, that'll take a little bit of time to do, but you can see now that I have the Ubuntu Desktop ISO file in my downloads folder. What is an ISO file? An ISO file is a disk image file. It's an image of a DVD or a CD-ROM, and what we can do with that is we could burn that to a physical DVD or a physical CD-ROM. Because this is about 4.8 gigs in size, well 4.6, you'd need to burn this to a DVD, but we're not going to do that because in VMware or any of the virtualization tools that we use, you can actually mount the ISO. You can even do that with the Windows operating system, which means that you can open the DVD without having to burn the DVD first. So let's go into VMware. Now, VMware is available in several different versions. I have VMware Workstation installed on this computer because I use it quite a bit. You can also get VMware Workstation Player for non-commercial use, which is completely free. It's a great tool to practice. There's also Hyper-V and OpenBox, and if you're on a Mac, there's Parallels. I'll put some links down below for Mac users. I think I have a discount code for Parallels, but you can check that out. Here I am with VMware Workstation. So I'm going to create a new virtual machine. And when I create a new virtual machine, I'm currently running Workstation Pro 16. 17 is out at the time this video is made. It won't matter for what I'm doing here. So you can see I can do a typical or recommended installation, or I can do a custom installation. I'll often do custom installations if I have specific networking or I/O needs, special operating systems. But for now, let's do a typical installation. And what's going to happen is VMware is going to select things like the amount of RAM. It's going to give me a typical hard drive size and handle some of the networking in the background. So I'm going to go here and say typical. A virtual machine will run inside your host machine. And so we refer to the virtual machine as a guest, and we refer to the machine running the virtual machine as the host. They're all local to your machine. So now I'm going to choose the installer disk image, and you'll notice that I have SQL Server here because I was doing some SQL Server work before. So what I need to do is I need to browse. In my case, I'll go to my downloads folder, and I'll grab my Ubuntu Linux here. So now I'm basically inserting the DVD into VMware. Now, obviously, I'm not actually inserting a physical DVD. It's the file that is an image of the DVD. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm saying to this, and then it's going to ask me for a name and a password. So I'll put in my name because it's easy for me to remember. And then I'm going to use that as my username as well. And then I'm going to put in my super secret password. Now, when it comes to your, well, talking and typing at the same time never works out for me. But I'll put in my super secret password. And when I put in my super secret password, I tend to use the same password for machines that I'm going to throw away. So if I just wanted to go in and play around with something for a while and not use it on a production basis, having the same super secret password that I use everywhere is just a handy way to use multiple machines for just playing around. So the other thing I'm going to get now is the virtual machine name. Obviously, I'm just saying in the real world, use a good password if you're going to leave this machine or use it for production. So the virtual machine name is going to default to the name of the operating system. I don't really want that because if I'm using many machines, it's going to be hard for me to separate them. So let's say I was going to use this to work with Python. I'm going to make this sort of a data science toolkit. So I'll call this data toolkit. And I don't like to put any spaces in the name. You'll see why a little bit later on. But this is just going to let me identify the machine in the future so I know exactly what it's doing. And then the location. By default, it's going to choose my documents location, and I don't really want that. So what I'm going to do instead, and this is a bit of a trick that I do, is I'm actually going to go into my folder that I have that's synchronized with my sync.com account. So if I go in here, there it is. So there's my sync folder. Now this is a local folder on my computer. It just so happens that this also synchronizes with the cloud. So in my case, I'll often build my virtual machines using this local folder, have the virtual machine on my local folder, and then when I no longer need it, I can easily move it into long-term storage on the cloud. That's beyond what you need to know. The point here is that you really want to make sure that it's a local folder that you're installing into. And the reason for that is because it's a hard drive that's going to be reading to and from your hard drive. So you want to make sure that it's fast. If you put it on something like an external drive, so here's an external drive that this one here has a little tiny gaming drive in here. So this has got a little SSD drive in there. And what you can do is these little drives will allow me to have a lot of storage at very high speed using USB-C. If you use, if you use a different type of drive, you can get USB 2 or USB 3. You do want USB 3, a USB-C connector. The faster the drive, the faster you're going to be able to read to and from the disk. Ideally, you want to put it on your local drive so that it's the fastest possible. So underneath sync, I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Ubuntu. I'll just call it Ubuntu demo, just so that I can, later on, I'm not likely to keep this one, so I can, go ahead and delete it when I'm done. But this puts all these files in a place that I'm familiar with. In my case, my sync folder and my Ubuntu demo. Now it's going to ask me, how big do you want this hard drive to be? Just because I select 20 gigs here actually doesn't mean it will be 20 gigs. What it does is it means it can grow to 20 gigs. This means that if I install programs and such, the maximum size would be 20 gigs. I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, you can grow up to be 60 gigs. This gives me some room to install applications, but you'll see that the hard drive file is not going to be that big. I'm going to create it as a single file, even though it's 60 gigs potentially, because my operating system can handle a file that large. Sometimes if I am doing something where I'm synchronizing with the cloud, I will split it into multiple files. But for this demo, I'm just going to store it as one drive. So we're going to store it as one large drive. And I'm going to say finish, gives me a summary of the configuration. Now you'll notice I didn't do anything in terms of memory or some of the other network configurations. You'll see that it's saying it's going to give 4 gigs of memory here. I could up that a little bit here. I could customize the hardware if there was something that I wanted to customize in here, like memory, things like my USB controller, network behavior, those types of things. But I'm happy with the typical installation. So I'll go ahead and close that and I'll say finish. Now I've configured the virtual machine. I've connected the image drive, the ISO, to it, and it's going to boot, recognize that ISO file, and begin the process of installing Ubuntu Linux. Now, Ubuntu Linux is a really nice version of Linux because it's going to go through and pretty much install everything for me. It's a pretty quick installation. It's even going to give me a graphical user interface. Other versions of Linux can be a little bit different than that, but you can see Ubuntu has this nice installer, and that's one of the things that makes it really nice for a beginner. I mean, you can start working with Linux. Let's let it install Ubuntu and come back to it once it's installed. I'm pausing the video and putting it on every so often just so that you can see it install. This takes a little bit longer than it will in this video, but just follow along and it'll install everything quite nicely. I'm going to take US English here. So this is just the installation of Ubuntu. This could be any operating system at all. So this could be maybe Windows 10, or maybe this could be something where you're installing SUSE Linux or a Debian Linux, whatever you want. Maybe you want to install a server so you can start playing around with server stuff. But you just follow the installation prompts from whatever operating system you've decided on. Ubuntu is pretty quick. It's just a next, or in this case, continue, and you'll wind up with a nice operating system. I'm going to pause the video and come back once it's fully installed. Okay, I kind of lied. I'm not going to, I'm going to pause every so often. One of the things that you might get when you're installing another operating system, and this happened with my Ubuntu install, that's why I wanted to show you this, is you'll notice that it says erase the disk and install updates. A lot of people get a little bit freaked out at this point because they're like, whoa, I don't want to erase my hard drive. You're not erasing your hard drive. You're actually erasing within the VMware, the virtual hard drive. It thinks it's a real hard drive. So it's going to ask you questions that might be a little frightening, like, do you want to erase your hard drive? Do you want to repartition your hard drive? Just remember, you're not erasing or repartitioning your host hard drive. You're partitioning and erasing your guest operating system hard drive. So I'm not worried about that. I'm just going to go install now, and it's going to install on the virtual hard drive, not the hard drive of my system. So I'm all scared. I'm going to write, to a disk, what's going to happen here? Not to worry, it's the virtual hard drive that's being affected by this process. So after watching some files go through, we'll go restart, and we'll have an Ubuntu Linux running as a virtual machine. I'll log in with my account, my super secret password, and now I have Ubuntu. I can start playing around, installing other applications that I might want, maybe some development applications, some programming applications, but I have my Ubuntu environment here. It takes a few moments to launch, and I'll be able to start playing around and doing all sorts of interesting things, learning the Linux operating system and having a lot of fun doing that. You can get VMware Workstation Player for free. Just go to vmware.com and you can start playing around with it. There are other platforms as well. And I have some other videos here on the channel around virtualization, and I'm working on a few even as I'm filming this one. But this one, somebody asked me, hey Frank, how do I install Ubuntu on VMware Workstation? I thought, you know what, I'll just put this video together for them and you. Hope you liked it. Like if you liked it, interact with the video, share it, comment, all those good things, and we'll see you in the next video.